My sister scrapped my embarrassing project car to punish me. So I went nuclear and made her pay for every bolt. Sup, Reddit. My sister thought she could teach me a lesson about embarrassing the family. She learned a more expensive one. I'm Blake, 27 male. I work as a service coordinator at a commercial HVAC company in Kansas City, which means I spend my days dispatching techs, ordering parts, and listening to building managers lose their minds over broken air handlers. It pays the bills, mostly. I've got student loans from a degree I barely use, and I went through a rough stretch 2 years back when the company downsized, and I spent 6 months bouncing between gig work and temp jobs before landing back on my feet. But I'm disciplined. I don't buy what I can't afford. I drive a 2009 Corolla with 187,000 miles because it starts every morning, and that's all I ask from a daily. The Nova is different. I didn't build it with money. I built it with Saturdays. My Uncle Dale is my mom's younger brother. The family calls him the black sheep because he skipped college, never chased a career with a title, and spent his life working at shops around the metro turning wrenches on other people's problems. But Dale taught me more useful stuff than anyone else in my family ever did. He taught me how to bleed brakes without trapping air in the lines, how to set timing with a Harbor Freight timing light, watching the marks on the harmonic balancer while the engine idled and listening for that sweet spot where everything syncs up. How to torquey head bolts in a star pattern so you don't warp the heads and hate yourself for months afterward. When I was 16 and bought a rusted-out 1973 Nova two-door base model for $1,800 cash, everyone in my family thought I was throwing money away on scrap metal. Dale walked around it twice, kicked a tire, checked the frame rails with a flashlight, and said, "We can work with this." That was 11 years ago. Years. The Nova's been sitting in my parents' garage ever since because my duplex doesn't allow any wrenching and I need Dale's tools and space to work. Over the years, we rebuilt it in phases. Cash only, always. If I didn't have the money, the car waited. I tracked down the correct rally wheels at a swap meet in Topeka after 8 months of searching and calling every seller on Marketplace within 300 miles. Rebuilt the 350 small block with Dale over 3 long weekends, learning every step from pulling the heads to checking bearing clearances. Refreshed the suspension with new bushings and shocks. Rebuilt the brakes with new rotors, calipers, and shoes all around. Reupholstered the interior with clearance material from a shop going out of business. It's not a show car. It's not worth a fortune on paper. But I put 11 years of weekends into that thing. And my sister Trinity decided it was embarrassing. My family runs on appearances. My parents live in a house they can barely afford in a subdivision in Lee's Summit, where everyone drives financed SUVs and carries credit card debt nobody mentions at neighborhood cookouts. The lawns are always perfect, because everyone's terrified of being the house with the bad lawn. Mom works medical billing at a hospital network. Dad manages a tire shop on the south side. Together, they probably make decent money, but they spend like they make double. Always stressed about finances. Always chasing the image of people who aren't stressed. Trinity is 31, works pharmaceutical sales, and has spent her entire adult life performing the role of successful daughter. Perfect hair that costs $200 a month to maintain. Perfect apartment in Overland Park with catalog furniture. Perfect leased Lexus she complains about because of mileage limits. Everything about Trinity is designed to project an image that's 3 tax brackets above reality. Here's the thing about Trinity, though. Our parents drilled it into her from childhood that image was everything. How you looked, how you sounded, what people thought when they saw you. By the time she was 12, she'd absorbed that lesson so deep, it became her operating system. When she got engaged to Finn Whitmore, my parents acted like she'd married into actual royalty. Finn comes from old Kansas City money. His family owns commercial real estate downtown and in the Plaza District. His mother sits on charity boards that require dress codes and minimum donations. They live in Mission Hills in a house with columns out front, like something from a movie about rich people having problems. Finn himself is fine, I guess. Polite in that trained way, where you can tell someone taught him exactly what to say at dinner parties. Never rude to your face. The engagement dinner was at a restaurant downtown, where the menu didn't have prices, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford to be there. I showed up in clean jeans and a navy button-down, because that's my nicest casual stuff, and Trinity's dress code instructions had been vague at best. Her eyes scanned me head to toe the moment I walked in and cataloged everything wrong. The jeans, the shoes, the haircut. I saw her whisper something to Finn's mother while gesturing slightly in my direction. Dinner was fine, expensive drinks, lots of talk about wedding venues and honeymoons in Italy and real estate. Finn's family has opinions about everything. My parents nodded along like everything being discussed was completely reasonable, and not absolutely insane for a couple in their early 30s, with one real income between them. I mostly stayed quiet and ate my steak and watched the dynamics play out. Finn's mother ran the conversation like a board meeting. Finn's father made occasional observations that everyone treated like profound wisdom. Finn himself said the right things at the right moments without ever really contributing anything of substance. And Trinity performed. Oh, did she perform? Laughing at jokes that weren't funny? Agreeing with opinions she'd never expressed before. Mirroring Finn's mother's body language like she'd studied it. Then Trinity decided to provide context about her family for the benefit of Finn's parents. Blake's our little grease monkey. He's been working on some old junker in Mom and Dad's garage for years. It's his hobby. Finn's mother raised an eyebrow. Oh, what kind of car? A Nova, 1973. He bought it as a teenager, Trinity added quickly. It's very rustic. Kind of a project that never quite ends, you know? The way she said rustic made it clear she meant trashy. I let it slide because I wasn't there to fight. I was there to eat free food and support my sister's engagement, even though she'd never supported anything I'd ever done. Classic American muscle, Finn's father said, surprising me. Those old Novas can be worth quite a bit if they're restored properly. I had a buddy in college with a 70 SS that was a beast. Oh, Blake's isn't anything like that, Trinity cut in quickly, shutting down any positive direction. It's been sitting in my parents' garage forever taking up space. Kind of an eyesore, honestly. The neighbors have complained. The neighbors had never complained about anything. The car sat inside a closed garage where nobody could even see it. She was just lying to make me look worse in front of people she wanted to impress. I finished my steak and made small talk about nothing, and drove home in my Corolla and told myself it didn't matter. Trinity had always been like this. Nothing new. I'd survived worse family dinners. She'd always treated me like a prop in her life story, something to manage rather than someone to respect. I thought I was used to it by now. Over the next 2 months, Trinity ramped up the pressure. Every family gathering became an opportunity to manage how I presented myself around Finn or his family. She'd text beforehand with suggestions about what to wear. She'd pull me aside at events to coach me on what topics to avoid. She started referring to the Nova as that thing in the garage, like it was some kind of disease. My parents went along with all of it because they were terrified of anything disrupting the wedding plans. The Whitmores were paying for half of everything. Finn's mom had opinions about the guest list, the venue, the caterer, the florist, the band, the napkin colors. My parents were so desperate to seem like financial equals that they'd agree to anything she suggested, even when it meant spending money they didn't have. Dale noticed the shift the next time he came over to work on the Nova. It was a Saturday in early October, the weather finally cooling off enough to spend hours in a garage without dying of heat stroke. The car was close to being finished. We'd finally gotten the exhaust sorted after 2 failed attempts, and the thing sounded beautiful. Deep rumble at idle, not obnoxious, just that old-school V8 growl. Sister giving you grief again? She wants me to be someone else for this wedding. Dress different. Talk different. Not mention the car around Finn's family. Not mention you either. Dale shook his head and made a small adjustment to the distributor. Your sister's been performing since she was 12. Don't get dragged into her show. I didn't plan on it, but Trinity had other ideas about my participation. The rehearsal dinner was 2 weeks later at Finn's parents' house in Mission Hills. The place was massive, landscaping that looked like it required a full-time staff, which it probably did. Columns out front like a courthouse. Inside was all marble floors and artwork. I wore slacks and a sport coat that I bought specifically for this occasion, because Trinity had sent 3 increasingly aggressive texts about the dress code and the importance of making a good impression, and how first impressions last forever with families like theirs. I was trying. I was genuinely trying to play along and get through this wedding without incident. The problem started when Finn's college roommate, a guy named Brett who seemed actually normal, asked me what I did for fun outside of work. I mentioned cars. He seemed genuinely interested and asked follow-up questions. I told him about the Nova, the years of weekend work, the small block rebuild, the satisfaction of bringing something back from the dead. We were having an actual conversation when Trinity materialized between us, like she'd teleported. Blake's so funny about that old car. It's been his little project forever. Very practical. She laughed in that fake way that signals she's not actually joking. But we love him anyway. Brett looked uncomfortable. I felt my face getting hot. Trinity put her hand on my arm in that fake affectionate way. Why don't you go get another drink, Blake? Let the adults talk about something else. 11 years of being the embarrassment. 11 years of being made to feel small, so she could feel big. I was done. I looked at her flat. At least my Corolla's paid off. How's that lease treating you? The room got quiet. That sudden drop in conversation, when everyone nearby stops to see what happens next. Trinity's face went white. Her hand dropped off my arm like I'd burned her. I walked out before she could recover. I heard her calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I got in my Corolla and drove away, then sat in my apartment feeling like garbage, but also like I'd finally said something that needed saying for years. 4 days of radio silence from the family. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive memes shared on Facebook. Nothing. I figured they were processing what happened at the rehearsal dinner. We'd have an awkward conversation eventually and move past it like we always did. That was the pattern. That had always been the pattern. Saturday morning, I drove to my parents' house to work on the Nova. Needed to finish the wiring cleanup behind the dash and do a final check of all the systems before the first real drive. Dale was meeting me at noon. The plan was to finally take it out on some back roads south of the city, see what 11 years of weekends had actually built. The garage door was closed when I pulled up. Weird. Dad usually left it cracked when he knew I was coming. I walked in through the side door and stopped. Empty. The space where the Nova had sat for 11 years was just oil stains on concrete and jack stands pushed against the wall. The tool chest Dale had given me was still there. Some shop rags in the corner. A couple of empty oil containers I'd been meaning to recycle. But the car was gone. My brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. I walked around the empty bay like an idiot, checking corners like a 40-foot car might be hiding behind the lawnmower. I walked outside and checked the driveway, walked around to the backyard, walked back into the garage and stood in the empty space, heart going nuts, sweating even though the morning was cool. I called Dad. No answer. Called Mom. No answer. Called Trinity and it went straight to voicemail like she'd blocked my number. I was pacing the garage when Mom finally called back. Blake, calm down. I can explain. Where's my car? Trinity had it removed. She said it was embarrassing having it there when Finn's family came over for wedding planning. It was taking up space and removed where? I don't know exactly. She arranged a tow truck. Tuesday morning. She said she was taking it somewhere more appropriate. Tuesday. The day after the rehearsal dinner. Mom. The title. Where's the title? Silence on the other end. Mom? It was in the filing cabinet, in the garage, with the registration and insurance papers. Trinity took all of it. My parents had kept the title for safekeeping since I was 16. The car was in my name, but they'd always held the paperwork because I'd been a teenager when I bought it, and it just stayed that way. I'd never thought to move it because I trusted them, because they were my parents. Stupid in hindsight, but you don't expect your own family to rob you. I hung up without saying goodbye and called Dale. He answered second ring. The Nova's gone. Trinity took it. She has the title. Pause. I'm on my way. Dale showed up in his old F-150 20 minutes later. I was still standing in the empty garage trying not to put my fist through the drywall. He didn't say anything stupid like calm down or it'll be okay. He just looked at the empty space where we'd spent hundreds of hours together and his jaw tightened. Call the tow companies. Everyone within 30 miles. Find out who moved it and where it went. We sat at my parents' kitchen table for 4 hours with phones and a laptop, working through every tow company, junkyard, scrapyard, and salvage operation in the Kansas City metro area. Dale took the Kansas side. I took Missouri. We worked through them methodically, calling each number, leaving voicemails when nobody answered, making notes on who we'd reached and what they said. My parents stayed upstairs the whole time. I could hear Mom crying occasionally through the floor. Dad never came down. They knew what they'd allowed to happen. They knew they could have stopped Trinity with a single phone call to me or a simple no when she showed up with a tow truck. They just didn't want to face that directly. Most places had no record of a 73 Nova coming through in the last week. Some didn't answer at all, just voicemail systems that might never get checked. Some were clearly annoyed at the questions and hung up fast. A few asked for vehicle descriptions and checked their intake logs and came back with nothing useful. Every dead end made it worse. By hour 3, I was losing hope. My voice was hoarse from talking. My hands were still shaking. The car could be anywhere by now. Could already be crushed into a cube of scrap metal. Could be in pieces heading across state lines to chop shops that wouldn't ask questions. Could be sitting in some yard 3 counties over where we'd never think to look. Then Hawthorne's Auto Salvage in Raytown picked up. A guy named Carl confirmed they'd received a 1973 Nova 4 days ago. A woman brought in the paperwork, said it was a family car they wanted scrapped for parts. She'd signed the title over, signed a bill of sale, showed her driver's license which they photocopied for their records. They'd paid her $600 cash and given her a receipt. $600 for 11 years of my life. Is it still there? Parts of it. We already pulled the drivetrain. Sold the engine and trans to a guy in Grandview who picked it up yesterday. Wheels went this morning to some kid in Olathe building a race car. Body's still here though. What about crushing? Scheduled for the compactor Thursday afternoon, unless someone claims it legal before then. Thursday. Less than a week. Don't touch it. I'm coming to get it. Doesn't work like that, friend. We bought it legal. I've got her signature on the title, her ID on file, bill of sale with the VIN, tow receipt from Allied Towing. Everything checks boxes on our end. You want to dispute ownership? You need to bring cops and paperwork, not just accusations. Dale drove because I was too wired to trust myself behind a wheel. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every few minutes, I felt like I was going to throw up. 11 years, gone in 4 days. Hawthorne's Auto Salvage looked exactly like you'd expect a salvage yard in Raytown to look. Chain link fence topped with razor wire running the perimeter. Stacks of crushed cars and cubes along one side. Rows of vehicles in various states of dismemberment stretching back toward the tree line. The smell of oil and rust and old rubber. A couple of dogs that might have been guard dogs, or might have just been strays sleeping in the shade. A double-wide trailer served as the office with a hand-painted sign that said, "Office, ring bell," and a smaller sign underneath that said, "No checks." I walked toward the trailer ready to fight someone. Dale grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a mark through my jacket. We do this smart, or we don't get the car back. You swing on anyone here and you're the criminal, and your car gets crushed while you're sitting in county. Understand? I took a breath, forced my hands to unclench, nodded, walked in behind him. Carl was behind the counter. 50s. Greasy ball cap with a faded Chiefs logo. Forearms like he'd spent his life lifting heavy things. You're the brother she mentioned? I'm the owner. That's my car. She stole it. Carl shrugged and pulled a manila folder from a filing cabinet behind him. Dropped it on the counter and opened it. Title transfer, signed by Blake Reeves. Bill of sale dated last Tuesday, signed same day, lists the VIN and vehicle description. Tow authorization from Allied Towing. Photocopy of her Missouri driver's license, which matches the name on the bill of sale as the seller's authorized representative acting on behalf of the title holder. Payment receipt for $600 cash. I looked at the signature on the title. It wasn't even close to mine. She'd basically scribbled something that vaguely resembled Blake, with none of the characteristics of my actual handwriting. That's forged. That's not my signature. Not even close. Could be. Could not be. I'm not a handwriting expert. We check the boxes. Titles signed, ID matches, VIN matches the vehicle, we process the transaction. We see it all the time. Kids selling a parent's car, spouses during divorces, family members cleaning out estates. We're not in the business of investigating drama or playing detective on every vehicle that comes through. You bought stolen property. I bought a car with paperwork that looked correct and passed our intake process. You got a problem with that, bring cops. Bring a court order. Bring something with official weight behind it. Until then, that shell sitting in row 7 belongs to Hawthorne's. Dale stepped forward, keeping his voice calm. What would it take to hold it? Stop the crushing? Stop any more stripping? Just hold it in place until this gets sorted out legally? Carl considered for a moment, looking between us. 200 cash, non-refundable holding fee. Buys you 2 weeks. After that, I need either a police detective calling me directly to confirm an active investigation or a court order. Otherwise, the car goes back in the queue. I had maybe $300 in my checking account until payday Friday. Done. I paid him in cash. He wrote out a receipt on a yellow pad, noted the hold in his intake logbook, and tore off my copy. Bring me a police report with a case number and a detective willing to make a call, and we can talk about next steps. Until then, the car sits in row 7 and nobody touches it. We drove straight to the Raytown police station. I filed a report for theft and forgery, laying out the whole situation. The officer took down everything. The forged signature, the scrapyard sale, the missing engine and wheels, the family dynamics. Then she hit me with reality. I have to tell you up front, this might initially be treated as a civil matter. Family disputes over property, title and parents' possession, questions about who had authorization to do what. The forgery angle is what gives us criminal jurisdiction, but proving that takes time. Handwriting analysis isn't instant. She forged my signature. That's fraud. Could well be. We'll investigate. But I need you to understand, this won't move as fast as you want it to. If you want that car protected, you need to work the civil side simultaneously. I got a case number. I got the detective's direct line. I didn't get any promises. Back at Hawthorne's, I gave Carl the case number and the detective's name and contact information. He made a note in his book. I'll verify with them Monday morning. Car stays put until I hear different. Then he walked us back through the yard to row 7. The Nova looked wrong. Gutted. The hood was propped open, and there was nothing underneath but rust and hanging wires where the 350 small block used to sit. The transmission tunnel was empty. The wheels were gone, replaced with mismatched junk tires on bent rims so they could roll it around the lot. Someone had pried open the glove box hard enough to crack the plastic, and papers were scattered across the seats. I walked around it slowly, touched the fender. Ran my hand along the body line I'd spent hours making straight with filler and sanding. All the work we'd done, all the weekends. All the parts hunted down and installed and adjusted until they were right. And she'd thrown it away for $600 and spite. Dale stood next to me without saying anything for a while. Then he put his hand on my shoulder. We built it once from nothing. We'll build it again. The next few weeks were phone calls, paperwork, and controlled rage. The detective verified my case with Carl that Monday, which meant the hold stayed in place while the investigation proceeded. Once the criminal case was officially open, Carl agreed to release the shell to me for towing, since it was now evidence in a theft investigation, and keeping it at his yard just complicated things for everyone. Dale and I towed what was left of the Nova to his garage across town. We set it on jack stands in his bay and spent an afternoon assessing the damage. Body was straight. Interior was intact, but the car was a gutted shell again. Set back years. The police investigation moved slow. Slower than I wanted, obviously. The detective pulled the bill of sale and title from Hawthorne's, got samples of my actual signature from my driver's license and bank records, and sent everything for handwriting analysis. These things take time. Meanwhile, my parents did what they always do. Defended Trinity. Enabled Trinity. Treated her crimes like bad weather that would pass if everyone just stayed calm. Mom called me crying 3 days after I filed the police report. Blake, please, this will ruin her career. This will destroy the wedding. The Whitmores are already asking questions. You're tearing the family apart over a car. She stole my car and sold it for scrap. She forged my signature on a legal document. That's not a disagreement about family values, Mom. That's fraud and theft. Those are crimes. She was upset about what you said at the dinner. She wasn't thinking clearly. She felt attacked. You pushed her to this. I pushed her to commit felonies? That's the story you're going with? That I'm responsible for her choices? You embarrassed her in front of Finn's family, in front of his mother. You know what happens when she feels like her image is threatened. She panics. She reacts. She doesn't think. So her panic response to feeling embarrassed is to steal 11 years of my work and sell it for $600? And somehow that's my fault for not being embarrassing enough for her tastes? She made a mistake, Blake, but she's still your sister. Crimes aren't mistakes, Mom. Mistakes are forgetting to pay a bill or missing an appointment. What Trinity did was premeditated. She waited until the next morning. She arranged a tow truck. She gathered the paperwork. She drove across town to a scrapyard. She signed documents. She collected cash. That's a series of deliberate choices. Mom didn't have an answer for that. Dad tried the angry approach when his turn came. I was vindictive. I was petty. I was destroying Trinity's future over a pile of replaceable metal. You watched her arrange a tow truck, I said. You didn't call me. You didn't stop her. You let her take the title from your filing cabinet. You're complicit in this. He hung up. I also filed a civil suit. My lawyer itemized everything we could document and defend in front of a judge. The market value of the 350 engine Dale and I had rebuilt together, based on comparable sales and the condition it was in when it left my possession. The transmission. The rally wheels I'd searched 8 months to find. The suspension components with receipts from when I'd purchased them. The brake upgrade. The interior work. Here's where it got complicated, and where my lawyer earned his fee. I couldn't just bill my labor at shop rate because I'm not a licensed mechanic running a licensed shop. The law doesn't let you claim $100 an hour for work you did yourself in your parents' garage, but we could document parts receipts going back years. We could get written estimates from actual shops for what equivalent work would have cost if I'd paid someone else to do it. We could include the purchase prices I'd paid for hard-to-find components. We added loss-of-use damages for the months I couldn't drive a car I'd spent over a decade building and had nearly finished. The judge would ultimately have to decide what was reasonable and what was reaching, but my lawyer structured the claim to make every dollar defensible. Most of the number was parts I'd paid for over the years, plus what I'd spent recovering the drivetrain from the Grandview guy, plus storage and tow fees, plus shop estimates for redoing the cut wiring and butchered exhaust. The total came to just under $19,000. The guy in Grandview who'd bought my engine was a car guy himself, worked on old Chevys as a hobby. When I tracked him down and explained the situation, showed him the police report and the case number, he agreed to sell it back. Cost me what he'd paid the yard plus $100 for his time, and trouble picking it up. Hurt my checking account, but at least I got the $350 back. The wheels were gone for good. The kid who'd bought them had already mounted them on his own project and wouldn't sell at any price. I'd have to hunt down replacements all over again. 3 weeks after I filed the police report, the detective called. The handwriting analysis was back. Conclusive. The signatures weren't even close. Different letter formations, different pressure patterns, amateur hour forgery. Trinity was formally charged with felony theft and felony forgery. The legal process ground forward over 4 months. Trinity hired a defense attorney. She claimed I'd given her verbal permission to dispose of the car. She claimed the signature was authentic, and I was lying about the forgery. She claimed the whole thing was a family misunderstanding that didn't belong in criminal court. The handwriting analysis killed that defense dead. The prosecutor didn't buy her story. Neither did the judge who reviewed the evidence at the preliminary hearing. She pleaded down to misdemeanor theft to avoid trial and the risk of felony convictions on her record. It was still a conviction, still a criminal record, still something that would follow her. Her pharmaceutical company put her on administrative leave pending an internal review. In that industry, any fraud-adjacent conviction is career poison. You can't be trusted with drug samples and doctor relationships when you've been convicted of stealing from family members and forging documents. The civil suit hit even harder. The judge reviewed my documentation, the receipts, the shop estimates, the parts values, the loss of use calculations, and awarded the full $19,000 plus attorney fees and court costs. One hearing got delayed for scheduling, which stretched things out another 6 weeks. But the outcome was never really in doubt once the criminal case established what Trinity had done. Trinity didn't have $19,000 liquid. She'd been living the same image-chasing lifestyle as our parents, spending every dollar she earned and then some to maintain the appearance of success. Nice apartment, leased luxury car, designer clothes, expensive haircuts. The lifestyle that looks great on social media, but falls apart the moment real money is required. The judgment meant liquidation. She sold the white Lexus she'd been so proud of and downgraded to a used Civic with 100,000 miles on it. I'm not going to pretend that didn't feel good. She broke her lease and moved out of her nice apartment in Overland Park into something smaller and cheaper on the Kansas side. She started selling furniture and clothes and anything else she could convert to cash on Marketplace and Poshmark. But here's real damage. Finn's family found out about the criminal charges through the grapevine. Rich people talk to each other constantly about who's doing what and who's in trouble and whose kids are embarrassing the family name. Scandal spreads fast in those circles because reputation is the currency that matters most. By the time Trinity tried to explain her side of things, Finn's mother had already formed opinions. Suddenly, there were concerns about compatibility and family values, and whether this is really the right time for such a major commitment. The wedding planning stopped cold. Venue deposits sat untouched. Vendor contracts went unsigned. The engagement stretched into indefinite postponement, while Finn's family evaluated the situation and gave things time to settle. Then it got quietly called off entirely. Finn handled it the coward's way. He stopped returning calls, started being perpetually busy whenever Trinity wanted to see him, took longer and longer to respond to texts until he just stopped responding altogether. Let the relationship die slowly through absence instead of ending it cleanly with an actual conversation. He never had to say the word. He just had to disappear gradually until she got the message. The wedding deposits were non-refundable. My parents had co-signed on several of them, trying to seem like financial equals with the Whitmores during the planning process. They were out almost $9,000 between the venue and the caterer and the photographer and the band. Dad had to take a weekend job at an auto parts store just to cover the credit card payments. Dale kept me from doing anything stupid during all this. Every time I wanted to call Trinity and unload everything I'd been holding back, he'd remind me the system was already doing the work. Every time I wanted to drive to my parents' house and have it out face to face, he'd find something on the Nova that needed attention. You're already winning. Don't give them ammunition to flip the script and make you look like the problem. He was right. Trinity was destroying herself through her own choices. All I had to do was stay out of the way and let it happen. And honestly, it was satisfying to watch. 8 months to rebuild what Trinity gutted in 4 days. Dale and I worked every Saturday just like before, sometimes Sundays when the weather cooperated, and neither of us had other obligations. I dipped into savings I'd been building for emergencies because this counted as an emergency, even if it wasn't the kind I'd planned for. The money from the civil judgment helped once it started trickling in through wage garnishments and court-ordered payment plans, but it came in pieces over months, not in any amount that made a real dent all at once. The rebuild went faster the second time because we already knew what we were doing. We'd learned the hard lessons the first time around, which bolts to fight with, which gaskets to replace while you had access, which steps you could skip and which ones you absolutely couldn't. But it still took time, still took weekends, still took money I'd rather have spent on something else. I found replacement rally wheels at an estate sale in Wichita after a 3-hour drive each way to inspect them in person. Old guy selling off his collection because his wife finally made him downsize the garage. We talked cars for about an hour while I looked everything over. The wheels weren't the exact ones I'd lost, but they were the right size and style and in solid condition, close enough. He knocked $50 off the asking price when I told him what happened to the first set. Said he'd been working on cars his whole life and couldn't imagine someone doing that to family. The 350 went back in on a cold Saturday in January. Dale and I dropped it into the bay with his engine hoist, bolted the motor mounts, reconnected everything. Rebuilt the transmission while we had it apart because you don't do a job twice if you can do it right once. New exhaust headers because the scrapyard had used a sawzall instead of taking time to unbolt things properly. New wiring harness because connectors had been cut to pull parts faster. Putting it back together felt good. Trinity's judgment took almost a year to collect in full. Garnished wages, liquidated assets, court-ordered payment plans. With interest and collection fees, she ended up paying close to $23,000 total. Her credit was wrecked. Her pharma career was over. Last I heard, she was working at a medical supply warehouse, making about a third of what she used to earn. My parents never apologized. They still blame me for destroying Trinity's life, as if she hadn't made every choice that led to her destruction. Mom sends guilt trip texts on holidays. Dad doesn't speak to me at all. I blocked them both after Thanksgiving when Mom tried to ambush me with a lecture about Christian forgiveness at Dale's dinner table. Dale asked her to leave his house. She cried the whole way to her car. I felt nothing. Maybe that makes me cold. I don't really care anymore. Last Saturday, I drove the Nova for the first time since getting it back together. Dale rode shotgun with the window down and his arm resting on the door. We took it out on back roads south of the city, past Belton and Harrisonville, where the pavement is smooth and the traffic thins out, and you can actually open it up without worrying about cops or minivans. The small block pulled hard through the gears, that familiar torque pushing us back into the seats. The suspension felt tight over the cracked county roads. The exhaust rumbled off the trees and farmhouses, that deep V8 note you only get from old American iron. Dale listened for a while without saying anything. Then he nodded once. Sounds right. Yeah, it does. We drove another hour without talking much. When we got back to his garage, I backed the Nova into the bay next to his '68 C10, the truck he's been slowly restoring since before I was born. He handed me a shop rag to wipe my hands. Same time next week? Same time next week. I got in my Corolla and drove home. The Nova stayed in his garage where nobody could touch it. Rebuilt twice now. Every bolt accounted for. Every cent collected. Mine. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.